I've been thinking about something since the last few videos. If the Anunnaki created us, and the Sumerian texts describe that process in detail, then who created the Anunnaki? Their texts say that they came from somewhere else, a planet, a civilization of beings that existed long before Earth, and that's fine. But who created whatever existed there? And who created that? And who created that? Follow it back far enough and you hit a wall that every tradition, every religion, and every philosophy, and now modern physics keeps running into. Something had to be first, and that first thing couldn't have been created, because if it was created, then the thing that created it was first, and then you're back at the same question. So at the beginning of everything, at the absolute start of whatever chain of creation you want to trace, there has to be something that simply existed, without cause and without a marker. Something that didn't need to be created because it was always there. What that thing actually is, well, that's what we're going to dig into. Philosophers have a name for this, the infinite regress problem. Every effect has a cause. That's the most basic rule of how reality appears to work. You exist because your parents existed. They exist because their parents existed. Go back far enough and you reach the first single-celled organism on Earth. Go back further and you reach the conditions on early Earth that allowed chemistry to produce that organism. Go back even further and you reach the formation of Earth from the solar debris. Go back further and you reach the formation of the sun. And then finally, you reach the Big Bang. And then you hit a wall. Because the Big Bang is described in physics as the beginning of space and time as we understand them. Before the Big Bang, there was no before. Time itself didn't exist. Cause and effect as concepts require time. You can't ask what caused the Big Bang using the word caused, because causation requires a sequence of events in time, and time began at the Big Bang. Physics has tried to get around this. The most popular attempt is quantum fluctuations. In quantum mechanics, particles pop in and out of existence from what appears to be empty space. Virtual particles appearing in an instant and then disappearing. Some physicists propose that the universe itself emerged from a quantum fluctuation. A fluctuation in the quantum vacuum that happened to be stable enough to expand into everything that exists. It sounds like it solves the problem, but then when you look at it closely, it doesn't. Because a quantum fluctuation requires a quantum vacuum to fluctuate in. And a quantum vacuum is not nothing, it's a state of quantum fields. It has properties, it has rules, it has the laws of quantum mechanics operating within it. If the universe came from a quantum fluctuation, something already existed that allowed that fluctuation to happen. And then you're back at the same question. What was that something, where did it come from, and who made it? Aristotle called the thing at the end of the regress the unmoved mover, the thing that caused everything without itself being caused. Aquinas called it first cause. Every philosophical tradition that is seriously engaged with the question has arrived at the same conclusion. The regress has to stop somewhere, and wherever it stops, the thing that stops it has to be unlike everything else in existence. It doesn't follow the rules because the rules didn't exist yet. Think about what we're doing right now with artificial intelligence. We built a mind before we built a body for it. The intelligence, the awareness, the reasoning, the thing that responds, learns, and generates exists entirely in software. It has no physical form of its own. It runs on servers, on computer chips, on hardware that it didn't design and doesn't control. The consciousness, if you want to call it that, came before the physical vessel. And now we're building the vessel. Humanoid robots that can walk, carry things, navigate the world. The plan, whether anyone says it out loud or not, is to put the mind we already built into the body we're still designing. Awareness first, physical form second. And nobody finds that concept strange because that's just how we build things, so why do we assume that it worked differently for us? The entire materialist position, the one that says consciousness is produced by brains, that matter came first and awareness emerged from it billions of years later through evolution, assumes the opposite of every creative process humans have ever run. We always design the mind before we build the container. Every time. Software before hardware, blueprint before building, intention before object. The Anunnaki texts describe the Anunnaki deciding to create humans before they created humans. The intention, the design, the purpose, all that existed before the physical being did. Which is exactly how we build things, and that's how we're building AI right now. And if you follow that logic back to the first cause question, the thing that existed before everything else and the thing that didn't need to be made, maybe it wasn't matter just waiting around long enough to accidentally produce awareness. Maybe it was awareness that produced matter. The way we produce robots, design the mind and build the body around it. That doesn't answer who made awareness in the first place, but it does change the direction that the question points. Every major ancient civilization engaged with this question. They all arrived at something similar from completely different directions. The Hindu tradition describes Brahman, not a god in the conventional sense, but the infinite, unchanging reality that underlies everything. Before creation, Brahman alone existed. Brahman didn't come from anywhere, it simply is. The ground of all existence, the thing that doesn't need to be created because it is existence itself. The ancient Egyptian concept of Nun, the primordial waters that existed before creation, describes an infinite, undifferentiated potential from which everything emerged. I don't think they were talking about water in the literal sense, but a state of pure potential with no form, no structure, no distinction. Everything that would ever exist was somehow already there in an unmanifested form. The first line of Genesis, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth," skips the question entirely. It starts with God as the given. The assumption is that God was always there. The text doesn't try to explain the origin of God. It treats existence as the starting assumption and asks what that existence did. These are all pointing at that same gap. Every tradition that seriously engaged with first causes arrived at something that exists without being caused. And none of them could explain what that thing is. They could only name it. Brahman, Nun, God, the Tao, the unmoved mover, the first cause. Different names for the same wall at the end of the same corridor. We've covered consciousness research on this channel. Van Lomel's Lancet study, the near-death experience data, the AIP Advances paper from 2025 proposing that consciousness may have existed before the Big Bang. And that specific paper changes the tone of the regress question. The most widely accepted position is that consciousness is produced by the brain. Matter came first, organized itself over billions of years into neurons, and neurons eventually produced awareness. Consciousness is the output, matter is the input. The alternative, which near-death research and certain interpretations of quantum mechanics point towards, is that consciousness is more basic than matter, that awareness isn't produced by the physical universe, that the physical universe might in some sense be produced by or within awareness. Physicist John Wheeler proposed something that he called the participatory universe, the idea that the universe requires observations to become real. That quantum mechanics taken seriously implies that physical reality doesn't have definite properties until something observes it. Wheeler spent the last decades of his career arguing that the universe bootstraps itself into existence through acts of observation, that in some deep sense it takes consciousness to collapse the quantum state of reality into something definite. If awareness is the thing at the bottom of the stack rather than at the top, then the first cause question has a little bit of a different shape. Because consciousness, unlike matter, doesn't obviously require something to make it. Matter needs ingredients, it needs prior matter to come from. But awareness, the bare active experience of something being like something, doesn't obviously need prior matter to exist in. It might be the kind of thing that can exist without being made, the kind of thing that just simply is. Every tradition that arrives at a ground of existence, Brahman, the Tao, God, the quantum vacuum, describes it as aware in some sense. Not aware in the way you and I are, but not inert either. Something that knows, something that contains the possibility of everything before anything exists. The question who made the first thing that can make things assumes that the first thing was a maker, a being, something with hands and intentions. But what if the first thing wasn't a maker at all? What if it was awareness itself? The bare fact of existence just knowing itself, and what we call creation is just that awareness, that infinite field of consciousness beginning to take on form. Follow that question, who made the first thing that can make things, all the way back, and eventually you run into a different question. We start out asking about creators, beings with technology, the Anunnaki or whoever they learned it from or whoever created them, intelligence that existed before us and shaped us. And then you follow it back far enough and it stops being about creators and starts becoming about existence itself. At some point in the chain, there has to be something that didn't have a creator, something that simply was. And the most honest description of that something across physics, across philosophy, across every ancient tradition that engaged seriously with the question is that it's something we don't have a good language for. Physics calls it the singularity and admits it doesn't know what it is. Philosophy calls it the first cause and admits that it can't explain it. Religion calls it God and admits it's beyond human understanding. The ancient traditions call it Brahman, Tao, Nun, the void, and they all agree it's the thing that words fail on. What all those things agree on, even if it falls under different names, is this. Whatever was first wasn't built. It wasn't created, it wasn't engineered. It existed before the concepts of building and creating and engineering had any meaning. It existed before the rules that govern everything that came after it were in place. It is the thing from which everything else, every creator, every creation, every chain of cause and effect, eventually traces back to. And the Anunnaki, if they existed, were the same thing. Whatever created them was the same thing. Whatever created that was the same thing. The chain doesn't lead away from us, it leads back to what we already are. Just saying consciousness was already there doesn't close the loop, though. It just moves the wall back one step. Because then it becomes, who made consciousness? Did it just appear? Did it materialize out of nothing? If nothing can't produce something, and consciousness is something, then consciousness needed a source too. And whatever that source was needed its own source. And now you're back at the same wall, just staring out a different window. Every door opens to the same corridor. The Tao simply is. Okay, why does the Tao exist rather than nothing? God created everything. Okay, who made God? The quantum vacuum fluctuated. Okay, who made the quantum vacuum? Consciousness underlies reality. Okay, where did consciousness come from? The question has no bottom. Every answer is just a name for the place where thinking stopped. And I'm sitting in a weird place with all this. The fact that something exists that can ask why it exists may be the most important thing about any of this. Whatever was first was capable of creating beings that were able to question their own origin. That's not random. That's not nothing. Whether it happened through billions of years of evolution, through genetic intervention, by something more advanced than us, we are existence asking what it is. That doesn't answer anything, but it means the question isn't separate from us. We're not the observers of the mystery, we are the mystery. I don't know what was first, nobody does, and I'd be suspicious of anyone that says otherwise. But the question doesn't go away no matter how far back you follow it. And the fact that you and I are here sitting here able to ask about it, that something in reality became complex enough to wonder about its own origin, that's more interesting to me than any answer that anyone has ever proposed. Where does the chain end for you? And if every answer we get just moves the wall back one step further, what does that tell you about the question itself? I'm interested in your theories, thoughts, and opinions on this one. What do you think started all this? What do you think was the starting point? There has to be a point A for everything, right? What was our point A? Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate the time that you invest in watching these videos. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe, like, and drop that comment. It really helps out the channel. Until next time, I'll talk to you later.